I freaking love the Sega Dreamcast. My older brothers got the Dreamcast when it was new, along with Sonic Adventure and Sega Bass Fishing. I didn't own it myself till I got it my own when I was older, but I remember playing a lot of it as a kid growing up, playing those games, as well as some cool demos. I even remember buying Sonic Adventure 2 with my oldest brother when it was launched. Mini consoles were quite the rage a few years back, with the likes of the NES, SNES, and PS1 Classic. Sega even threw their hat into the ring with the Mega Drive Mini a couple years back. There were talks of them doing a Dreamcast Mini back a few years ago, and while I'm not sure if they'll actually do one, I've been thinking of the games I would love to see on one, especially watching a few people expressing their own takes on what they would love to see. Now the question is, how many games would be on this device? The NES and SNES cassette had around 20 to 30 games on it. PS1 cassette had about 20 games on it too. The Mega Drive came in with 41 different games, which is a lot. However, since the Dreamcast is a more powerful machine compared to its older 16-bit system with more complex games, I decided to reduce it to 26. It seems a good size to me. I consider the obvious choices, but I also try to think about accessibility and preservation, since some of these games never got ported or are hard to find. I do want to see some variety of games too. Besides that, there aren't any other rules. So, let's get started. So, up first are the most obvious choices, being Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. You gotta have Sega's poster boy in the collection. Up next is 2-2 Rocket by Sonic Team, which is a fun puzzle game where you must guide a bunch of mice onto a rocket ship without them being eaten by cats. Okay, so having Crazy Taxi is an obvious choice, being one of the games when people think on the system, but I also decided to include the sequel too, which includes new areas and game modes. If they just picked the first game, I would be fine with it. I think the biggest hurdle for either game now is trying to get the licensed music for these games. It feels weird not having the songs by Offspring or Bad Religion while crashing and driving around. I feel we need a rhythm game on this list, and Sega has got some classics. Firstly, I decided to choose the first Space Channel 5, which, unlike Part 2 that can be played on Xbox Live and Steam, is only available on the Dreamcast and PS2. The other game is Res, made by the same team, which is a combination of a rhythm and an on-rail shooter. Res never came out on the Dreamcast in the US, since this was at the end of the system's life, but it's one of the more unique games with its visuals and soundtrack. It's one I really enjoyed on the system, as well as the Infinite version on PS4. The Americans did get this on the PS2 and the updated Infinite version, but it would be great to see them play this with a Dreamcast controller. While these games aren't for everyone, they played an important part for Sega's final system, being one of their most expensive games they made at the time, and also one of the most groundbreaking too. I feel you have to have both games together to add to the collection, since both are tied to one story. Also, you can play older games like Space Harrier 2, so that's a bang for your buck. Jet Set Radio is pretty accessible, but it's a no-brainer to be added onto the system with its stated arcade gameplay, stylish cel-shaded visuals, and funky music. The biggest obstacle is some of the licensed music, but unlike the port of Crazy Taxi on Steam that removed the Offspring and Bad Religion songs, Jet Set Radio managed to bring back the majority of its songs, so I think it has a better chance of getting in. If they can't, there are original songs too to fill in the void. I made a review of the game not too long ago, so check it out. This is one I would love to see. Out of any game on this list, Skies of Arcadia is the game I want to be on the Mini the most, as I feel people should at least try it out. This is a great RPG that unfortunately not many people have played, since this game is expensive to get even on the GameCube. Even if we don't get a Mini, I wish they would give it a port onto current systems. Sega was well known for their racing games, and the Dreamcast was known for its arcade titles too, so I thought I added at least one driving game. I decided to go with the Dreamcast version of Daytona USA. Its catchy soundtrack and short but fun arcade racing gameplay would be a great time. I wanted to add a House of the Dead game, but I think the add-on accessory would be an issue paying more for an accessory. However, since a lot of these minis have USB ports, I did imagine you could connect your keyboard onto the Dreamcast and play some Typing of the Dead. This is a goofy game that I did see people having a blast with. While looking at other people's wishes on YouTube, I came across a Japanese exclusive by Sega called Cosmic Smash, which is basically a combination of Swass and Breakout. It reminded me of the previously mentioned Vez that streams Y2K energy. While it's a Japanese exclusive, it actually has an English dub and gets a lot of fun with its arcade style gameplay. I don't think this would take a lot of effort to put this one in. Now, this one would require a lot of effort. I'm not sure how likely this is, since the reason to play this one is online, but having online functionality would be a huge selling point for the system, and the one to show off is Phantasy Star Online, being seen in plenty of top 10 favourite Dreamcasts, especially with people who grew up with the system. So now Atlas is part of the Sega family, I thought it would be fitting to add an Atlas game too. However, Atlas was more known for having their games on the PlayStation at the time, and there weren't any Shin Megami Tensei or Persona games on the Dreamcast. They did make one game for it though, a first-person hack and slash game known as Maken X. From the looks of the game, I read at the SMT vibes from the atmosphere and the art for the game by Kazuma Kaneko. It looks pretty cool and it never got ported anywhere else, so this could be a neat addition. Capcom were big supporters for the system, especially since the system was well known for their great arcade conversions. There are a lot of fighting names that could be added alone, however I didn't want to add too many Capcom fighters. I originally thought of adding Third Strike, but the game can be easily played nowadays thanks to the Street Fighter TXN, unlike Marvel vs Capcom 2. MVC2 was a game me and so many people want to see come back, even as so far as adding a hashtag trend on Twitter. This game has some difficulties with licensing, but Disney has allowed Sega to add the Mickey Mouse games, Castle and World of Illusion, onto the Mega Drive Mini, so there is some possibility they would allow them to have Marvel too. If they don't, then I would add Third Strike onto the list. A couple of these are going to be Capcom fighters, and the one I want to see the most besides Marvel is Project Justice, the sequel to Rival Schools. I never played any of these games unfortunately since neither came out in Europe, but they are so fun to play with the tag team gameplay and story mode. This game also remained an exclusive besides the arcade version, and it is even expensive to get nowadays, but if this was one of the games on the Mini, I think Capcom fans would be excited. This is another Capcom fighter that remained exclusive to the Dreamcast. Techno Romancer is a 3D mech fighter and is a spiritual successor to Cyberbots, another obscure fighter. It's not as expensive as Project Justice, but I think this one would be fun to play with its meta designs, story mode, and destructive environments. Cyberbots was only on arcades until Capcom Stadium came out a few years ago, and it would be nice if Techno Romancer got a similar treatment. If you're more of a party arena style fighter, then I think Power Stones is a great pick. There were 2 games for it on the Dreamcast, but out of the 2, I'm going to pick the sequel due to its 4-player mode, and that would be great for those fun gatherings. I'd say it's more accessible than any Capcom fighter due to the lack of motion controls, items, and that party game vibe. The first 2 games did get a PS3 TXN, however it hasn't been ported to anywhere else. While we have plenty of Capcom fighters, I wanted to add at least one more, but from another developer. Namco's Soul Calibur is my pick, and is one of the few examples where the console version was better than the arcade game in terms of graphical power and content with the mission, team battle, and plenty of unlockables. Besides the Marvel vs Capcom games, this is another fighting game that defined the system, as was one of my favourites. This is perhaps Capcom's most expensive game on the system, and probably one of the most expensive games out in their library. Canon Inspired is a twin-stick shooter that stars Cammy and Tai from the Street Fighter games, and also features some other Capcom stars like BB Hood from Dark Soldiers, Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins, and Mega Man. This game also never got ported anywhere else, and if you got this game when it came out, or if your name is Scrooge McDuck, This would be impossible to get through official means. This would be a great official alternative for die-hard Capcom and arcade shooter fans to try out. Speaking of shooters, the developers Trezor are known for their explosive high-octane action shooters from Dawn-style Heroes, Sin and Punishment, to their most popular Ikaruga, which I was considering for this list. However, you can get Ikaruga on practically anything nowadays at a cheap price. Instead, I went with one of their other Dreamcast titles, Bangai-O. Now it's a bombastic, fun twin-stick shooter that never got a modern port besides a couple of sequels. This was originally released on the N64 in Japan, but the western side of the globe will remember it for the Dreamcast that made some improvements, like visuals and audio quality. This is my second pick for an arcade shooter style game for the Mini. So far, I only included one RPG game, but I think it needs another, and one of the most well-known and beloved is Grandia 2. I haven't played this one yet, but from what I hear, it's one often being shown in people's top 10 favourite games on the system. That would be a good pick. This did get ported to the PS2 and PC, but I hear the original version is still the best choice to go with. When you think of horror games on the Dreamcast, you probably think of Resident Evil Code Veronica or the port of Resident Evil 2 and 3. And while I would predict that Sega would pick Code Veronica over this game, since it's a more well-known and accessible through modern platforms like Xbox Live and gets on PlayStation, I wanted to include something else that never saw the sun again, and that game is Illbleed. I never heard about this game since it was a financial flop that came out months after the Dreamcast's death. However, I heard it from stock statements from fighting years back, and it seems to have a small yet dedicated following. This game also remained on the system and is very expensive. You play as a group of students who enter a murderous funhouse named Illbleed, and if you survive the night, you win $10 million. Like the Mega Drive Tetris on the Mega Drive Mini, this could be a decent surprise for many to try out. I also heard it doesn't have tank controls, so I wouldn't mind giving it a go. The SNES Mini had a cancelled title for the Super Nintendo despite being completed, which was Star Fox 2. The Mega Drive Mini included the Sega version of Tetris, the arcade Darius, and the Japan only at the time Monster World 4, and I think this system should get the same treatment. The final game on this list never got an official release, despite being fully completed, due to certain reasons. I'm sure if Propeller Arena was announced for the system, it would be one of the main reasons to buy it, just like how Star Fox 2 was for the SNES Mini. Propeller Arena is a 4-player dogfight combat game where you shoot down your opponents with various planes. It seems like a blast to play with friends. If the Mini does have online functionality, then I could see Propeller Arena being one of those games that uses it, like it was originally intended. Apparently the game was going to have some licensed music from bands like Rise Against, but that could be replaced with some of the original music for the game. I had some difficulties trying to build this list. Some of these games originally had online functionality like Phantasy Star and Jet Set Radio, and while this may take a lot of effort for a novelty system, this would be exciting to see. I could even see some of the multiplayer games like Power Stone 2 and Marvel even add online functionality. I would also like Sega to recreate the VMUs with the minigames like the Child Garden intact. The VMUs are perhaps the best memory cards for this reason alone. As a little bonus, it would be cool to add little exclusive VMU games, or even connect these VMUs onto your PC like a USB and send stuff like Chow's online. A lot of this is just my wish list, as I don't think some of these games like Phantasy Star would make it on this list, especially with the online functionality, and I would imagine games like Code Veronica or Street Fighter being picked instead of Illbleed and Marvel. It's been a while since we had a mini console, and I'm not sure if Sega would make one, but I could dream. I wouldn't mind doing a Saturn wish list in the future, especially since it needs more with its exclusives. But at this moment, I would love to see the Dreamcast get one. I would love to hear what games you would love to see on it down in the comments. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.